Are you in Psalm 139? All right. So last Wednesday night, in the last month, we read the entirety of Psalm 139. I'm not going to do that tonight. I'm going to read verse number 7 down through verse number 12. I believe it was last Wednesday night. And so we're going to start in verse number 7, and we're going to stay in Psalm 139. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going anywhere else. But in verse number 7, David says, "Whither shall I go from thy spirit? Or whither shall I flee from thy presence? If I ascend up into heaven, thou art there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, thou art there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there shall thy hand lead me, and thy right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, even the night shall be light about me. Yea, the darkness hideth not from thee, but the night shineth as the day. The darkness and the night are both alike to thee." And so tonight I want to preach on this thought, the omnipresent God. Last week we gave you the thought, the omniscient God, the all-knowing God. So tonight is the all-seeing God, the everywhere God. That's what the thought is tonight. And just as we dealt with the omniscience of God, or the fact that He is all-knowing, I'm grateful. And in my conclusion tonight, I'll give you this challenge again, that God sees all and is everywhere. And that is something that should give us hope, but it's also something that should challenge us. That God sees everything that we do. In that you cannot escape God. David told us in these first 6 verses about how that God knows everything. He knows our thoughts before they form in our mind. He knows our words before they form in our tongue. The same thing can be said about the places that we may go and the places that we may attempt to hide. And so I believe that it is unnerving. I'll give you this quick illustration and get right into it. Just have 3 points tonight. I remember I had my 3rd grade teacher. She was her name was Miss Fisher. She was the first. Even my mother did not have this skill. Miss Fisher could be writing on the chalkboard, and she was facing the chalkboard. I was not saying a word. I was simply passing a note, or I was hitting somebody or pulling somebody's hair or doing something, and she would say, "Burke." The whole 3rd grade career, she blew my mind. The fact that she knew everything and she could see everything. My hand before the Lord, my first official job was at Winn-Dixie in Palatka, Florida. After I graduated, Miss Fisher was in the meat aisle. I walked up behind her. She could not see me. Before I got there, she said, "Burke, what are you doing?" I'm like, how in the world did she know that? Maybe she had, I don't know. Maybe God gave her a gift. I don't know. But that should make us pause when we think that God knows and God sees everything. I'm going to give you these 3 things, and I'm gone tonight. Number 1, David's probing questions. Verse number 7, David says, whither shall I go from thy spirit? Or whither shall I flee from thy presence? This word whither is, we could say where. So David asks the questions, where can I go from thy spirit? From thy spirit, we know that a spirit is something that when we think of it in our human minds, it's something that kind of floats around. It's very free. Okay, so I need us to think about it in that very finite way. All right, and he says, "Where can I go to hide from your spirit?" Something that is free, something that can go places that I can't even go. Where can I go to hide from that? Then he asks another question. Where can I go to hide from your presence? So he steps up his question. He says, Lord, your presence seems to be everywhere. Where can I go to hide from that? I believe we can sum up David's questions by asking another one. Is there anywhere or is there any time that I can escape God's view? You think about it. We even said this last week. We tell our children, God doesn't like liars. God doesn't like ugly. We teach our children those things to hopefully put the fear of God in them. But you do understand that God demands holiness from His children. And when we disregard that and we live ungodly lives, that God sees that. God knows where we go. He sees where we've been. He sees the steps that we misstep and the words that we misspeak. God sees all of these things. In the context of this psalm, I don't believe that David is trying to escape God. Verse number 1, O Lord, thou hast searched me and known me. The next to the last and the last verse, search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts. See if there be any wicked way in me and lead me in the way everlasting. He is not trying to hide from God. He is just asking some probing questions. It would do us good. Listen to me. We all think, and I know we don't. I know that we don't. But there are times in our lives that we think we know all we need to know about God. How many of us as children got to the point where we hated school and we said, I don't need to go to school anymore. I know all that I need to know. Man, I can't tell you how many times I've said that. But we didn't. I said that before I learned subtraction. And honey, when they started throwing in that I could take from the number to the left, borrow from that number and add it to this number, that blew my mind. To this day, Camden, I can't figure out borrowing. I can't. And then they put letters with numbers. Oh my goodness. It was a constant it is a constant learning process. But we sometimes think we have God all figured out. It would do us good to get down to bare knuckles and start asking God some probing questions. You've got a question on your mind. You've got some question that's just been nagging at you. Why don't you ask God about it? Listen to me. Sometimes we say you shouldn't ask God why. I'm not one of those people that would tell you don't ask God why. I think you should. And I think you should sit still and keep quiet until God tells you why. Maybe He will, maybe He won't. But you should be quiet and listen for a while. But ask those probing questions. God, why is this happening to me? God, why did you choose me for this? Maybe you're in the ministry. God, why did you choose me for this ministry? God, whatever the case may be, ask some probing questions. David asked some probing questions, but then David provided his own answers. I believe he provided his own answers because of his experience with God. In verse number 8 down through verse number 11, he answers these two questions that he asked in verse number 7. In verse number 8, he says, if I ascend up into heaven, thou art there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, thou art there. He said, I can't go to the heights and I can't go to the depths. If I go to the heavens or if I go down to the depths of hell, Lord, you're there. In verse number 9, he says, if I take my wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, thou art there. The morning appears first from the east. I believe it, Brother David, I believe it was you that talked about that east wind. The sun rises from the east. So that morning comes from the east. And he says, if I take the winds of the morning, he said, and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea. And as the man is looking over or towards the horizon over the sea at the setting of the sun disappears in that sizzling moment. It looks as though the sea just keeps going and going and going. He says, if I go to the depths as far as the eye can see, Lord, you're there. Not to the heights, not to the depths, and not to the extremes, because God is already there. Verse number 11, I absolutely love. He says, if I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, even the night shall be light about me. We were going home a couple weeks ago after church, and I got to looking around. We were going over the bridge right before you get to the house. I said, man, it is dark. The night before, and I thought, just get over it. I ain't smart. The night before, the moon seemed to be huge. The next night, I don't know where it was. Maybe that's nature. Maybe it disappears after it's big. I don't know. Probably so. But it was dark. And I got to looking around. I looked. I even asked the Lord, and she said, I don't know. Maybe it's cloudy. Maybe it's behind something. So I spent the whole night or the whole evening as we got home, and I was just looking. I could not find the moon anywhere. It was dark. Do you know sometimes you go outside and the moon is huge and it's bright and it almost looks daylight. I don't think that's what David is talking about. I don't think he says, if I go and hide in the dark, the moon is so bright that, Lord, you'll find me. I really think that David is talking about one of those nights that there is no light in the sky. It is pitch black. And he says, God, I'm going out and I'm going to go into the dark. He said, even then, look at it. The night shall be light about me. Almost to say, even the darkness itself will betray me. Even the darkness itself will say, here he is, God. There's no hiding from the Lord. David provides his own answers. In verse number I've got to be careful here because I'm wanting to get a little ahead of myself into verse number 12. Let me go on to number 3. David's perception of God's omnipresence. We go back now to verse number 8, and I'll kind of repeat a few things. We see God's abiding presence. Now keep in mind that the word abide means to dwell continually. Okay? He says, if I ascend, verse number 8, thou art there. If I descend, thou art there. If I'm not mistaken, in verse number 8, when he says, if I make my bed in hell, that's the word, if I'm saying it right, Gehenna or Gehenna. And if memory serves me right, that's a place outside of the city or outside of the city gates where they would take all of the trash, the refuse, and they would set it on fire. And it would continually burn. We see that in the New Testament as well. And he said, if I'd go to that horrible place, and it was a pit, and it was nasty, and it was hot, it was horrible. He said, if I go to that horrible place, nobody wanted to go there. He said, if I go to the depths of that place, Lord, you're there. I remember when I was a kid, not a lot of people say this anymore, but they would say things like, I'm so saved I could swing over hell on a rotten corn stalk with a water pistol filled with gasoline. That's how saved I am. And I'm not saved. I believe if I ever found myself in hell, which I never will, but if I ever found myself in hell, God will have beat me there, and He would hedge about me. Because I'm one of His own. David said, if I go to the heights, you're there. If I go to the depths, you're there. He said, this is God's abiding presence. And then God's continuing activity. In verse number 10, He says, even there shall thy hand lead me, and thy right hand shall hold me. He said, no matter where I go, thy hand shall lead me. This comes off of verse number 9. He said, the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost part of the sea. He said, no matter where I go, thy hand shall lead me. But then I believe we can say this, no matter how far I go, thy right hand shall hold me. I believe it was Brother Michael Calhoun. It was either Sunday night or Monday night. I had a great time over at Greater Vision on Monday night. Brother Michael Calhoun, I'm pretty sure it was him, he mentioned just those few words that Peter said when he got out of the boat, or before he got out, when he got out of the boat, began to sink. He said, Lord, save me. I don't know how deep he went, but he called out to the only one that could save him. There's some folks that we know, there's some folks on our list, our prodigal prayer list, that have gotten pretty deep. But I am happy to say tonight that not a one of them have gone too deep that God's hand can't reach down and help them. I have never, I'm not going to say I've never been a prodigal. But if I have, I've either Brother Jody, I've been a prodigal behind the pulpit or on the front pew. Brother David, chances are I have. And that's sad. But I've never left church. I've never physically, visually gone astray. Nobody's ever had to ask me where I've been. None of those things. But in those times that I've stepped away from God in my heart, it felt like I was a mile away from God. And He was there. I honestly, and I'm not passing judgment on anybody, as bad as that felt, still being in church, but feeling like I was a mile or 1,000 miles away from God, I cannot imagine how it must feel to have that and to be out of church. I can't fathom that. And I don't want to fathom that. But I'm glad I'm glad that you've not gone too far. That God can't reach you. And then God's unlimited scrutiny. When you scrutinize something, you look at them, you uncover, you move stuff around, and you look under it, and you turn it, and you flip it, and you take a look at it. Verse number 12. Let me look back at verse number 11. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, even the night shall be a light about me. Verse 12. Yea, the darkness hideth not from thee, but the night shineth as the day. The darkness and the light are both a light to thee. God's unlimited scrutiny. The darkness is no limitation on His observation. Darkness hinders us. I remember when I guess we were here a couple of years, and Brother David asked me if I wanted to go hunting, and I think the first time it was probably in the afternoon or evening, something like that. And I'm like, yeah, I'll go. Well, then I think the next time was a morning, and it was morning. Talking about the sun hadn't gotten up yet, and it was dark. And you were hunting in Ellaville at the time. And he's like, just go down this trail right here and you'll find a stand. Me and my little gun and my little boots. And I'm like, man, these boogeymen's out here. I don't know what I'm fixing to find. And you know what happened? Every little sound, I was looking around. Every little twig, every little leaf sounded like it was just loud as all get out. Because what used to it. Ashlyn, I don't know if you remember Tremont. When you were so little. When we lived in Tennessee, Ashlyn went to this place up in the mountains and they took us out on a night hike and they had crayons. And the moon was shining, but they waited until all the car, there were some cars down there that had passed, and they said, okay, now everybody close your eyes. And we closed our eyes and they said, okay, now open them. And our eyes had kind of got accustomed to the dark. And they said, now look at these colors. And we said, what color are these? People began to say, well, this is red, this is whatever. They said, okay, if you think yours is red, then you draw this. If you think yours is blue, you draw this. And so we grabbed a color and we started drawing. We got back to the camp and we looked at what we had drawn, thinking that we had a certain color. And all of us were wrong because our perception was wrong, because we couldn't see. The dark had changed our perception. The dark changes the way you hear. The dark changes the way you see. The dark will change the way you feel. The dark will change your fears. But it does not have that effect on God. Matter of fact, verse number 12 says, even the night, but the night shineth as the day, the darkness and the light are both alike to thee. It doesn't matter if it's light or dark to God. He can see through it all. It may hinder us. And we may think we can hide right well in the dark. But we'll never hide from Him. Let me go back to the previous statement that I made at the beginning. There is hope and there is warning in this attribute of God and His omnipresence. There's hope in that God sees our enemy and that God sees the trouble ahead on our path. If you have a vehicle and it's maybe got GPS in it, or maybe you have your phone up and it's GPS and you're in an unfamiliar area, especially at night, maybe it's very curvy. You're driving, you're paying attention, but you can kind of cheat a little and you can look at your GPS and you could see a curve up ahead. So you know to look a little more diligently because there's a sharp curve up ahead. God sees your path. And God sees the enemy. And God sees the trouble up ahead. Usually, no matter where I go, I have a GPS, especially long distance, because it'll say there's a hazard, or there's a speed trap, or there's a police, or there's this, that, and the other up ahead. It's warning me about hazards up ahead. This attribute of God it's hopeful for us because He sees what's ahead. But it's also a warning because He sees when we sin. Just as we established last week, He knows our thoughts. He knows our thoughts before we even know them fully. But He knows when we sin. And He knows the secret place that we try to hide our sin. We think we have the key tucked away somewhere to our tucked away hiding place. But God knows where the key is. He knows where the hiding place is. He knows where the combination is. God knows all of it. I believe that's why David ended the prayer and he said, search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts. And see, there's that omnipresence. And see if there be any wicked way in me. And lead me in the way everlasting. So we find last week the omniscient, the all-knowing God. And now we have the omnipresent God. So I trust that it has been a blessing, maybe a challenge to you tonight.